No, he really, because his bias was clear.
She ran in 2018.
All right, 1 minute.
And then she's
All right. So do I know everybody in the room? Maybe pretty close. All right.
Thank you. I write in hieroglyphics, so no, just in case. Most of it is
Did
just,
somebody ask you about the rooms and meals tax or something?
yeah, no, I had that in my head.
All right, it's 4 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. Just before this session, Greg Moore was telling me that the state of New Hampshire has a good budget every 10 years. And so, we had a great one 10 years ago, and under Speaker O'Brien and Ken, and last year we had a terrific budget thanks to these 3 gentlemen here, and so at the end we have Representative Ken Weyler, who is the chair of the Budget Committee. Then we have in the House, we have Senator Garry Daniels, who is the chair of the Finance Committee in the Senate, and Representative Pat Abrami, who's the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the House. And so we're going to talk about it, what was good about it. We're going to talk not numbers, right? Basically, this is a budget of what, $10 billion, 12?
13.
13, okay. I've been out of it for a few years, so it's $13 billion. And so just imagine, you know, I'm the shopper for my family, right? And so imagine just, you know, running for office and here's $13 billion. How do you want to spend it? You know, it's incredible. Anyways, so we'll start by having our panelists introduce themselves and tell us. So everyone in New Hampshire, all these 3 people, their pay is $100 a year. All right, they're volunteers. This is not a job. This is a hobby for them. Okay.
Avocation.
Yeah, you know. So we're people who like politics, right? It's fun, and so unlike the other 49 states, right? It's very different. In those states, everybody's an attorney and all that, but here it's ordinary people, and we have the biggest house, but biggest government, state legislature, but it's the cheapest as well, right? I mean, there's no question about that.
Most frugal.
The most frugal, yes. We're Yankee, thrifty type of people. Anyways, so I'd like you all to introduce yourself, talk about, you know, what did you do for a living, what do you do for a living, and how'd you get into politics and when? Thank you. Start with Ken.
Good afternoon. Ken Weyler. I grew up in Massachusetts. I knew better than to stay there. I went to MIT like Dan and Carol and studied chemical engineering, but I was also in Air Force ROTC. Had a chance to go to pilot training. I did. Had 6 years of active duty in the Air Force and decided I think I liked flying better than being an engineer. So I went to work for American Airlines, and between American Airlines and the Air Force Reserve, I spent 38 years in the flying business. While I was doing that, I got active in Kingston. I've lived there since 1970. I was on the planning board and the planning commission, and then had the occasion to go up to the legislature. We were working on things in the planning commission about planning, and I went up to talk to one of the bills, and it was in the Senate. The senators were asking me questions, and when I got done, I thought, I know more about this than they do. And right? So I said, the next time an opening came up, yeah, I ran for state rep back in '90. It was a special election. My predecessor went to jail. And so it left an opening. And so ever since then, I think I was out 1 year in the time since 1990. And most of my time since about 94 has been on the finance committee. I've been in leadership roles most of the time, but they only let me be the chairman when it's a tough budget, right? So Bill O'Brien made me the chairman, and then Sherm Packard made me the chairman this last time, but of course the governor didn't like that. But anyway, I've enjoyed being on the budget. I learn something every year, believe it or not. And it really helps to have experience to know who's the best BS artist from each division that comes before you and spins the tale. And you also have a lot of good background that you can question them. I also served as chairman of the fiscal committee, which appoints the legislative budget assistant, a very important man. And he has 8 employees that spend full time with us when we're doing budgets, both Senate, House, and the Ways and Means Committee. And these people are professionals and CPAs, and they keep track of everything we say, so we couldn't do it without them. Then they also have 30 employees in the LBA that do audits. Now, I think sometimes on the fiscal committee, there's 10 of us, I think I'm the only one that read every audit. But very instructive, and I can put them aside so when that people come before me, you know, you've had this write-up now for 5 years ago and then last year. When are you gonna fix it? You know, so those things come in handy when you put them on their back foot. They don't come up with such a smooth baloney story. But anyway.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Gary.
My name is Garry Daniels. I live in Milford. I'm the senator for District 11, which is the towns of Wilton, Milford, Amherst, and Merrimack. I served 18 years in the House before going over to the Senate. I'm in my 6th year in the Senate, my 2nd term chairing Senate Finance. Locally, I'm also in my 19th year as a selectman in the town of Milford. So I've got that connection between the town and the state, and very much understand how what we do at the state affects what we do at the town. I'm a member of the American Legislative Exchange Council, as is Ken, and that is one of I think the big reasons why this budget came out the way it is because we had a process that we were following that we'll get into later that really it's proven. It's proven, and I think we saw the results of it this year.
Pat?
Yeah, Pat Abrami from Stratham. Been a state rep for 6 terms. It's my 12th year. Been on Ways and Means all that time. I've been vice chair for six years. My chair, Norm Major, who many of you know, is the master. He's been at it a long time. I'm kind of chair in waiting, and I continue to be chair in waiting, which is fine with me. Working with Norm has been great. He has the numbers. He tracks revenues every day, just so you know. I mean, he has his spreadsheets. There's nothing gets by Norm when it comes to revenues. But I grew up in Long Island, New York. I went to the University of Buffalo, like 2 MIT guys, but I am an engineer, industrial engineer. I was part of a firm. I was a partner in a firm of 5 with 4 of the partners. We were about 40 people total. We consulted in healthcare, hospitals, all that time, and we brought efficiencies to hospitals. And that was our goal. And again, like I said, it was a national, we were all over the place. So I was 61 years old when I decided that I was gonna jump in, and I was still working then. And I won, and my district then included, it was a bigger districts before the first redistricting, where we were going to, it was Exeter, Stratham, and Northampton. And it was 8 seats, I was able to win one of those seats. Then the next term that we redistricted, and now my district is just Stratham, which is actually a lot easier just to run in one town. On Ways and Means, I understand that in this house, we have about a 3rd term. We don't need term limits. It's a 3rd term. Either people don't get, because we only get paid $100 a year. So people are there because they want to be, obviously, and like it was said. And that 3rd that don't come back, either don't choose not to run again, or they don't get reelected. So all our committees, though, it's 3rd term. So every time we start our Ways and Means process, we're educating the newbies, just like finance does as well. So, but anyway, that's a little bit about background, and I know we're going to be talking about other things here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the kind of the overview of the budget process. The budget process starts with the governor. He comes up with a skeleton, which maybe you don't like that much or you throw out. and talk about the do you make a kind of a general plan with the speaker and the Senate president and sort of say, okay, our target number is 13.37 billion, or how do you do it? And we'll start with Ways and Means. We'll start with Pat.
Ways and Means goes first, House Ways and Means goes first, then House Finance, then the Senate. Now, the Senate, Gary's on both Ways and Means and Finance, but you chair Finance, but you're also on Ways and Means. So the Senate has the luxury of having March and April numbers, especially on business taxes, because of because of filing. We actually see the returns, and those are the two biggest months for revenues. So we start by bringing in, first thing we do is we bring in experts, we bring in economists and all that. We bring in demographers, we bring in people from real estate because of the transfer tax. We want to understand how that's working. So we hear from all those experts. Then what we do is we bring in all departments. The Department of Revenue only has 8 revenue streams. Then there's a lot of other departments. We have to hear from lottery because that's a big number. We have to hear from, I don't miss anybody here, lottery and liquor commission, okay? We have to hear from the Justice, the AG's office, because they do the tobacco settlement money, and so on. So that we hear from a whole bunch of other departments. We hear from quite a few departments about what they think. Where do you think we are with revenues? And then we ask them to give us their high and their low of where they think with current taxation, with current fees. We base everything on current, nothing projected forward or, we do taxes or we do that later on. We want a pure look at where we are right now with current tax structure. And then what we do is after we hear from all those folks, we get together. Now the last 3 terms, what we've done is we have the Republicans caucus and then the Democrats caucus. And we come up with our ranges and we come up with our targets. The Democrats do the same. Then we get back in a room and we start voting. And again, there's 19 streams of revenue. And we have to do it 3 times because we have to project how the current year is going to end, because the fiscal year ends June 30th. So we have to project, we're starting in January, so we have 6 months that we don't know how the current year is going. Then we have to project the next year, and we have a biennium budget, we have to project out 2 years. So, which is not easy, because a lot can happen in those periods. So we basically we actually have 57 votes. And what we do is, I'm the vice chair, so I kind of move things along. We said, well, Democrats think this, Republicans think this. If we can't get a consensus on a number, when we're in control, we have the final say. Democrats in control, they have the final say. But the bottom line on this whole thing is that the whole is equal to the sum of its parts. So for each one of those, we were mentioning the legislative budget assistant, he's in the room. Well, the deputy is in the room with his computer. As we vote on things, he's calculating. At the end, we come up with a number. That's the number. We don't go back and say we don't like that number. We say, this is the number, and we say, here, Kenny, here's the number, go to it. Sometimes they moan, geez, wish it's a little higher. No, this is the number. Sometimes they say, well, this is good. So, and then it goes from there. Then it goes to the floor, resolution, and then that's the number that they work with. Later on, one last story, later on, then the finance does their thing, then it goes to the Senate. Senate Ways and Means, again, as I said earlier, has more information because now we're into April, May, and they have more, how did this year really end, the current year we're in really end. And so what we do before finance and before Senate Finance finalizes their work, Ways and Means takes another crack at adjusting our number based on more current information. And we give that to our finance guys, so when they're in a committee of conference, they have a better number that the House came up with to negotiate with. So basically, that's the process. We don't, like this year, we didn't, like we had a lot of tax cuts, we'll talk about that later, but we had a lot of tax cuts in the budget, which is a really good thing. And we'll explain how that works in a minute, but
Okay.
I'll stop there.
All right, we'll go to Ken.
All right, so there's my starting point. Whatever Ways and Means tells me, that's all I can spend. I've got to make the budget meet that number. February 15th, the governor has to deliver his budget to me in the finance committee. And it's like 1,500 pages. And also, on every page, I have, what did we have in the last budget? So that's a good starting point. So we split the reviews up among 3 different divisions. That, of course, almost half the budget is Health and Human Services, so that goes to one division. Then we have another division that handles education and highways and the fish and game and the university system, all the education stuff, as well as the lottery commission.
Safety.
And safety. That was something we did a few years ago. Used to have safety in a different division, and they were stealing all the money out of highway. And then highway would come. I finally passed a law to limit how much safety could take out. Then further on, we made safety reviewed at the same group that was reviewing the highway, so they couldn't take so much money out. But, you know, they would do things like, I think it was in 80. No, it wasn't 80. It was in maybe 2000. They weren't gonna make Ford Crown Victorias anymore, but the cops really love them, was what the commissioner told us. And so he bought 567 Ford Crown Vics, when the replacement level on the cruisers was about 99 a year. Some of those sat there for 5 years before they even moved, and they weren't in very good shape. But that was the kind of thing that slipped by if we weren't careful. So we look at those. We know what we did. Most of us were there 2 years before, and we know what the stories were we heard then. So the number that came to us from the governor was 70 million more than what Ways and Means told us we were allowed to spend. So we sat down and we said, whoa, here's a challenge. And then we looked at the previous budget. The Sununu had said, wow, I see 100 million here from repatriation from overseas funds. That is a one-time thing. So let's just spend it on one-time projects. Let's, go to this city and complete their park. Let's go to that city and complete their bridge. And so he had this whole list. He sent it to the finance committee. The Democrats were in charge. They threw the list out. And of course, we all agreed you don't use one-time money to spend government, all of us. The Republicans agree with that, but the Democrats just love to grow government. So they threw most of this money at Health and Human Services. So we sat down to look first at the Health and Human Services budget. One of the things we immediately noticed, they were approved for 3,600 employees because of all the money that had gone to them from the previous budget. How many employees do you have? 2,300. There's the savings. We'll make this budget work. And we had the pandemic and we couldn't hire people and all this and that, all kinds of excuses. But basically, I don't think you knew what to do if you had another 1,000, 1,200 people. So that was an easy job to get most of that 70 million. And then we went through a few other areas like that. But that's the thing you kind of got to look for and look at what you know from previous budgets and what we've seen for progress. We also have to look at all the legislation that has passed in the ensuing 2 years. Somebody might have decided, bright idea, we're gonna give more money to this, so we're gonna spend money on that, or we're gonna create a whole new division, or we create a whole new department. And okay, if that passed, now we gotta try to fit that in the budget. And we might have to make cuts somewhere else to start this new process. So you have to look at all those things. What's the legislation done to us? And then we're going through it line by line. And there's a few sections of the budget that'll be all federally funded. Okay, we don't spend a lot of time reading that line by line, but most of the others, we're going through it line by line on all these 1,500 pages, and quite often there's 15 to 20 lines per page, and so we just go through it methodologically, wait a minute, what's that word?
Methodically.
Methodically. We're going through it methodically, asking all the questions, and you know, it might take, we might spend, you know, 12, 14 hours with the department and bring in their different divisions and start going through them. I can remember years ago, and probably Dan does too, we'd spend, you know, from 9 in the morning till sometimes 8 or 9 at night, and sometimes we'd work Saturdays too to catch up. We've been pretty good this last few years. We got it honed down a little bit, so we'd fit it in within a reasonable 5-day week and go through it all. And we'd sometimes have to give up the vacation that came in February because we had too much to do. But basically that's it. And then sometimes we'd have to send them out, get us more information about this, get us more information about that. We'd come back another time and look at it again. And so I told you what the two of the divisions. Division 1 gets everything that's left over. And so they have about, I don't know, 15 different departments they've got to look at, you know. Corrections, the judiciary, you know, anything you can think of that, you know, the administrative service, the legislative money that's spent, all those things get looked at by Division 1. And they spend a lot of time on all these different agencies that most of us haven't heard of before. But they stay pretty busy and they get a lot of work done. So we hope to wrap this up by late March, so we'll have it all ready to go. And then the other thing that has to be mentioned, the budget can't contain law changes and things like that. So there's another bill that we call the trailer bill. HB 1 is what we call the budget. HB 2 is what we call the trailer bill. And that comes from the governor, basically, and it's got, this last time, 300 separate items. It had 60 pages of reorganization of the Public Utilities Commission and the creation of a new energy department. So, in that case, I went to the chairman of Science Technology and I said, look at this and tell me if it's good. And I didn't spend a lot of time on it. There were 60 pages there, and that's his expertise, that's his area. He does that kind of stuff all the time. So wherever I could, I would parcel out some of these things to another policy committee so that they could be in on it and they wouldn't come back to me later and say, what the heck did you do that for? You know, all right. If you'd asked me, I wouldn't have never gone on. So I always try to involve all the other, sometimes I tried to have each one of my committee members be a liaison to one of the policy committees, but that never worked out because they were too busy in finance to go and sit down and spend time with the chairman of the other policy committee. But I tried to touch with them all myself if I thought things. So anyway, it came to us with 310 different subjects. And I think there were, and that was from the governor, there were 2 of them that he didn't get. And that was because of the wheeling and dealing I had to do with various groups in the Republican Party to make sure I could get this budget passed. And a lot of them hated some of the stuff the governor put in. So the previous 2 bienniums, the budget did not pass the House. One under Democrats and one under Republicans. So we all made it.
So it's touch and go very
It's
often.
touch and go, and we only had 208. And in personal conversations, there were 10 or 15 people that made the statement to me, oh, I never vote for the budget. What? How can I pass it if you have this attitude? Well, I just don't think it's a good idea to vote for the budget. Well, you're gonna just let the Democrats decide? But that's what's happened some years. And
Sometimes the most famous one about Maggie Hassan, when we first did the major tax cuts on the business.
oh yeah, she
And it's
claimed.
it's the $90 million hole in the budget and all that. And then, so that we went to continuing resolution because Maggie wouldn't sign the bill, we wouldn't give in. We went to 3-month continuing, but the solution was a great solution at the
Yes.
end.
And the amazing thing was, she got calls from the people that were gonna benefit from the budget that had supported her, saying, hey, what the hell are you doing? We need that money. Now we haven't got it. So instead of money being available July 1st, it was up till November, I think, before they got the money. And some of them were very upset with her. She ended up calling the Democrats to join us in overturning her veto. so I never thought she was very bright.
So I never thought of that, see, the governor doesn't get to write legislation except in House Bill 2, right?
Yes.
That's his one chance to
Yep.
put stuff into
Oh,
law. All right, Gary, so what happens when it gets to the Senate?
So, as Ken mentioned, dealing with a state budget that is as thick as it is quite a daunting task. Ken and I think, are both advocates of zero-based budgeting, but in the time that we're given to do the budget, it's very hard to go through all of it with that. So, one of the things that we did early on that Ken didn't mention is we sat down and said, okay, what's the process that you're gonna go through? Because he and I are very much on the same mindset. And the first of all, we're gonna look at it and say, is this what we're looking at, a core function of government? Okay? And then, if it's not, it gets set aside, and you would go on. Then, is it a want or is it a need? Is it a requirement that we do this? And so by breaking it down in those steps, it actually becomes much more manageable. Ken, when he's going through the House and as I'm studying it, going through the Senate, when I get it over, I very much understand, and a lot of what we have talked about is already built into there. So we take what the House given us. This time it was a very challenging one, particularly with the groups that made up the House budget, and simply because you didn't have that margin. I think there were about a 12-vote margin between passing and failing, and so you needed to have all that together. The House presented the Senate with some daunting challenges in the budget, which we started addressing, understanding where the House was. And I think the thing that I'm really proud of is that, as Republicans, we came together to pass this budget. A budget that, has been claimed by the American Legislative Exchange Council, YAL, Young Americans for Liberty, as the best budget in the country. It was the only budget that reduced spending and
cut taxes.
And cut taxes, and made us one of the most livable states in the country, and the lowest poverty level, the second lowest unemployment, and all that really translated into more revenue, which we started to see in the Senate as a result of a process we had put in 2014 to reduce the business profits tax, the business enterprise tax, and we started to see businesses respond to that. They came to New Hampshire, they were generating more, so we were starting to get more revenue than we expected. We were able to take a step further this time and say, okay, let's take care of the asterisk that's always next to New Hampshire, which they claim is a no income tax state, but we do have an interest in dividends. So we have set in place a process where we will phase out the interest in dividends tax over the next 5 years. So going all along with that, we made promises, and we talked about those promises when we ran for election, because we believe that if we're telling the electorate something, we need to be able to say we did what we promised. And we told that to the businesses, and we made it more possible for business to be successful in the state. We made promises to the people that we heard their cry about property tax relief. Now, ironically enough, that was what the Democrats were running on too: property tax relief, property tax relief. Well, the plan we put together returned almost $300 million in property tax relief to the local communities. And ironically, not one Democrat voted for the budget. So, so much for them supporting property tax relief. But these are the things that we looked at, that we brought together. It's a combination of promises, frugal ways of looking at the budget, a methodical way to go through it, and
So was the main source of these tax cuts the higher revenue that you saw later, or was it specific cuts that you really?
It was high revenue, but Senator Denise Ricciardi had also put in return on meals, room and meals tax of 40%, going back to the 30%, going
No,
back.
hers was 40.
What's
It
that?
wound up, hers was 40, it wound up, compromise was 30.
Okay, the compromise was 30, but it ended up being $50 million more than before. So that was part of it. The $100 million that Ken talked about, that the House put in to come from the statewide educational trust fund, statewide educational property tax, we kept that in, we gave that back to the local communities. And we debated, whether the state should be telling the local communities how to use this money, or whether we needed to let the local communities decide how to use it. And, as much as we wanted to say, this is for property tax relief, we did leave it up to the locals and push back. And I think we saw some of that later when we encouraged people as they talked to us. We said, go talk to your school boards, go talk to your selectmen, make sure that they use that money to reduce your taxes. So it ended up bringing together a political process that I think worked better because it involved every level of government in working through the budget to give the property taxpayers the relief they were looking for.
And we have learned that when we try to send money back to reduce property taxes, it ends up in the education budget anyway. I remember in '99, we spent $200 million more in education funding than we ever had before. And by the time it got there, 40% of the towns had already voted an education budget, a school budget. So those 40% got tax relief. The other 60% did not. The following year, nobody got tax relief. All the money went to the schools, who hired more people, non-teaching staff, all this sort of thing. That's when we started on this juggernaut, where teachers are now about 40% of the school staff. I mean, this is ridiculous. Teachers are only 40%. What do you go to school for? To be taught? Who teaches you? Teachers. Why do we need all these other people? They haven't given me a good explanation yet. They claim we caused it, and I asked them, show me the bill, I'll kill it. Never showed me the bill.
Pat, you want to make?
See, I'm gonna talk on the same theme here, because our statewide property tax is $363 million a year, fixed number, every year. Then goes to Department of Revenue, they do the calculation, they calculate the tax rate. It's the fourth part of your tax bill, your property tax bill, right? So the brilliance of what we did was we said, we're gonna reduce we're gonna take out of the general fund, because we're overflowing with money, we're gonna take that and put it in the education trust fund. And then when the DRA, because the DRA sets the tax rates, they set those tax rates lower. So it was direct, and this is happening the second year of the 2 years, so it's gonna be.
You won't see it till next year.
They won't see it till next year, but there'll actually be a reduction, because we didn't trust the schools to do what they're supposed to. They weren't gonna give it back. So we made sure that we reduced the tax rate. It was brilliant. And I think this is the model for the future. I think when it comes to, when we say we wanna give money back to the towns, we wanna give money back to the taxpayers of the towns, not the towns. Because there's, I know you're a selectman, but, but we don't, I just wanna make the important point, because this is the first time this has ever been tried, and I think it's really gonna work. And I think as we tend in ways and means to be conservative, especially in how, and I think you guys too, all of you are very conservative. In our estimates, we're conservative. We rather have extra at the end, and then make a decision what to do with that money. Okay, just like your home budget. I always treat it like my home budget. And then we have the flexibility to say, okay, let's keep on reducing taxes, knowing that we're safe. We have a buffer, and that's what we've been doing. And the only other tax that we reduced that wasn't mentioned here was the meals and rooms tax by 0.5%, from 9 went to 8.5. And that's meals, rooms, and car rentals. Car rentals is the smallest part of that, about $8 million from that. So
Yeah, it's much better at the end of the day to have a positive surprise than a negative surprise.
absolutely. And I think we've honed this, as long as the Republicans are in charge. When I first ran, Doug Scammon was speaker, Doug was my town. First thing he told me, he says, don't trust the Democrats when it comes to the budget. He says they're gonna always overestimate the revenue. So I said, don't worry, I'm gonna get myself on Ways and Means, we'll make sure that doesn't happen. So, and it's been a good 12 years, and anyway, I'll leave it at that.
So one thing you haven't talked about yet is there's, in House Bill 2, those 300 items, there's a lot of sort of non-budget related things. The main one that everybody knows about is the third trimester abortion ban, which I'm very much in favor of and glad you did it. Are there other things like that, and how do those things come about?
I have trouble trying to
Yeah,
refresh
but I
all
know
the-
we're gonna talk about.
Another
I
one
brought
was
my
the-
cheat sheet.
The governor wanted the family medical leave insurance,
Yes.
and that was highly opposed in the Republican caucus, so it didn't go in the way he wanted, and we didn't put in that other thing you talked about that he wanted, and so, you know, at one time, he's got me in his office, he's got this metal rod. You screwed up! I should veto this budget! And he went on for 10 minutes, there were all of my chairs and vice chairs and the divisions there. Finally, I had enough, and I got up and I stood up and I said, hey, Chris, you're talking about vetoing a budget with 4 tax cuts? How big a fool do you think I am? You know, and he's been angry at me ever since, won't speak.
Yeah, EFAs, the Education Freedom Accounts,
That was big, that was big.
which, you know, we're just sitting back and letting all the opponents do the work.
Marketing it. They're marketing it.
Because originally there was an estimation of that 200 kids would leave the public schools and go, connect into these education freedom accounts. And then the schools started coming down with all these vaccine mandates and mask mandates and all. And you could just watch the Zoom meetings of the school meetings with parents just lining up to say, if you continue this policy, I'm taking my kid out. Well, we now have over 1,800.
2100.
Over 2,100, well, continues to grow. Of people that are using the education freedom accounts. So we don't really have to do anything. It's kind of let them stand back and use their policies and then cry about how so many people are leaving public schools. But another one in there is we know it is CRT,
Yep.
a critical race theory, or we put that under the anti-discrimination law, and that has settled down to a certain extent. You still hear a few times things popping up, hearing there. Let's see, what else did we have in there? Those, I think, were probably
Those are
the
the main
3
ones,
main
yeah.
ones, yeah.
Those are the controversial ones, some of the others will list, so.
In my honest
Go ahead.
opinion though about HB2, it's getting a little bit out of control. I mean, because, you know, if we're not in control anymore, Democrats are gonna do the same thing. And a lot of these things weren't really budget related. And it really, HB2 is supposed to be the trailer bill for the budget. And in my 12 years, I've seen it go from, it's like, it becomes an omnibus bill. You know, it becomes this big gigantic bill, and then, you know, if Democrats ever get in control, they're gonna do the same thing back to us. But that's okay, I'm just saying, I'm not king. But I've expressed myself on this, that it's gotten just a little bit out of hand here now.
Well, we
with
had
all-
to put in things like all the tax cuts could not be directly in the budget.
Yeah.
They had to go in the trailer bill, spelling out the dates that they started and the amount they went down to. There was no other place to put that other than in the trailer bill.
Yeah, Pat, you wanna make
Yeah, what I'm coming up, the predecessor to the freedom accounts was a bill that we passed maybe 4 or 5 years ago to give tax credits to businesses who donate money to this fund to give scholarship fund, right? So.
Thank you for that, I do that all
Yeah,
the time.
no, right, so,
Yeah.
it's been working very, very well, so.
It's not 100%,
So,
but it's a
like,
good
when the
deal.
Democrats got in control, one of the first bills came to Ways and Means, they wanted to do away with this. What they didn't expect was you were talking about the kids showing up?
Yep.
How many kids show up in the hearing?
Yep.
And every one of those stories was unbelievable, how it changed their lives, that one size doesn't fit all, you know, I wasn't thriving in the public school, now I'm thriving. And I could see, and it was a long hearing, it was like 3 or 4 hours. I could see one by one the Democrats being picked off, because they were totally against it, and we actually killed the bill. I mean, the reversal bill, that they wanted to get rid of this program, and they they saw the light on that one. But anyway.
Yeah,
that's just like-
I found that most everything that we do, you know, in making policy or whatever, somehow comes back to money. And so when you talk about things like education, freedom accounts, or any of the other things that we put in House Bill 2, I think you can follow a money trail back to state spending as a loss or a gain. But, you know, to Pat's point, I would say that with your comment, the incentive there is to work hard and stay in control.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats play hardball, and it's time we learn to do it too, I think, to some extent. But anyways, we have about 12 minutes left. Why don't we open it up for questions here? All right, behind Greg and then Greg.
Yeah, so mine's kind of two-pronged, so I'm a little unclear and I'm a new resident and mover. What's the original intention of the trailer bill, and is there a formal way for folks like yourselves who are the most in touch with the concerning trend of its bloat? Is there a way for you to, sound the alarm and get some sort of mechanism?
I'll give a simple example.
Yeah.
He mentioned the restructuring of the Department of Energy, whatever. So you need a law to do that. But there's definitely budget issues surrounding that, right? So it's appropriate that it's in House Bill 2. So it's the enabling bill, because it enables the budget numbers to work, the dollars in HB 1 to work by having the law behind it changed to reflect that. Okay, and now let the experts explain it.
Well, if you want to pass a tax cut, you can't put the language for that in the budget. It has to be in an accompanying bill with the dates and the times and so on. If you wanted to change a program around, you can't put that, or you want to eliminate, or you want to add a department. The legislature's in charge of organizing the government. Sometimes the commissioners and the governor forget that, but that's our job. Even if, like years ago, I was on a bill for the court. The court just can't do what it wants. We created the district courts and the circuit, circuit courts that, we let the judges give us some ideas, but we were in charge. So there's a lot of things that go along with the budget that are going to be part of the budget. But in order for this to be part of the budget, law changes have to be made. So that's where you make the law changes. And the reason it gets so complicated is sometimes we've been waiting 2 years to do these changes to the budget, and now here they all come at once. So
The simple explanation is House Bill 1 is a 1,000-page spreadsheet. And it says, in this month or this year, in this department, you're gonna spend this, right? And then House Bill 2 is all the words,
So
to make the law correspond to the spreadsheet.
it's the policy that backs up the justification for the numbers.
Yeah.
And then back to, how do I pass this budget? I go to the Republican Alliance and they say, we're not voting for this if you don't have this fetal bill in there. You gotta have this anti-abortion bill in there, or we're not voting for it. I support that. All right, I'll put it in there. This Family Medical Leave Act, it's a lousy idea, it's gonna lead to an income tax. Don't have it in there. Okay, I'll take it out. So I can wheel and deal to try to make sure I get the votes to pass this budget. Otherwise, all this work we're gonna do is for nothing. So, yes, I have some political strengths in there.
Greg and then Jeff.
Sure, so we're 8 months into the first year of the budget, and revenues are up almost $192 million over
That's the
plan,
number.
which is about 15%. I guess this question is for Pat and Garry. To what do you attribute being that far off?
Well, we're pretty conservative. I mean, even the governor's was 70 million above ours. And again, that's just the way we work. And again, most of it has to do with, this past budget, which was 2 years ago, that we're looking at now, is, now we just passed it, well, it was COVID-19. We were all guessing a lot about how quickly, when we did that budget, remember it was 2000, and it was January, February, we were doing our estimates. No one knew where COVID was going. No one knew how quickly it was gonna come back. So we went a little more conservative because of that. Turns out, COVID, things have come back. I mean, meals and rooms, revenue bounced back. When it came back like a spike. I mean, it came back really quick, and it was great. So, but we didn't wanna over-project that. That and the other one that was hurt really big was the real estate, and then also to a degree the road toll, we call it, the gasoline tax, because there was less people traveling. But that's all come back, and so we were conservative. So good. Now we have this. Now we have the flexibility to keep on looking at other places to cut the taxes. Now we've proven that revenues can be at this level. Now's the time to cut. Not the other way around. We've got to remember, our philosophy, at least in my committee, is that we don't want an income tax and we don't want a sales tax. We don't want to give the Democrats any excuse, any reason to even think about that. Okay, but we're also very prudent in how we cut. And we've been cutting, and we'll continue to cut the rates.
Jeremy?
I'll
So
say,
in traditional open question format, I'll start with things that aren't a question. So one, thank you very much for the work you guys are doing. If the audience was proportional to how we're making the state freer, this would be the most packed session. So here's everyone here because you get it. And then two, look, win however you can. Republicans are going to control the state the rest of this year, probably the next 2 years, guaranteed. If this tactic of jamming things into the budget, jam, as far as I'm concerned, jam everything in there, get you done. You got 2 years, make the state as free as it can possibly be. Maybe it'll bite us in the ass later, but it's like, I wouldn't hold back if you could do it. But my actual question is, schooling generally, I'm talking about it being something like 15+%. You guys probably know the numbers. I know in Manchester, it's like 50+% of my tax bills in schools. So it's like, this is it. If you don't do something about this, then, everything else is moving deck chairs, right? So, what do we do? Is the HB 607 approach where you're basically saying municipalities have to have a referendum on school choice? Is that the answer? What are you guys looking at? Because to me, this is the real battle. If we win this one, we can really win and make the big.
So much of that is in your local city or town.
Yeah.
You've got to elect the right people. You've got to look at what they say. You've got to look at what party they voted in. You might be in a very Republican town and everybody who wants to run for school board is a Democrat. You didn't know they were Democrat because it doesn't say that on the voting thing. And they get in control of the polling. I can't believe that this woman that's been in charge she's been the town moderator for 3 elections. And I mean, it was like when I'm standing out there with my sign, every hour she'd come out and yell at me. Who put that sign on the fence? Get that out of there! An hour goes by. How come those signs are out by the road? That's not allowed. She was really acting like a Democrat. But that's what you have. If you don't look out and you don't go to the school board meetings and you don't try to find out what those people are going to do on the school board, there's not a lot I can do. I can send them more and more and more money. And in the towns, it's like 80-85% of the property taxes are going to the school budget. Like maybe 10% goes to the police, the fire, the roads and everything else, and 4% goes to the county. But 85% is going to the school budget, and they just think, even though we hit the peak of 200,000 students in like 2002, now we're down to about 160,000 students. That's a huge decrease, but the budget kept doing this.
Yeah.
And you go and you argue with them, well, we had to add this subject, and we had to have special teachers, and we had to have more paras, and we had to have, they all think they're doing the right thing, but none of them ever think of economics. It's just but it's somehow, it's the whole thing I call about naive idealists. I don't have to pay attention to money, because I'm doing the most wonderful work in the world. So don't even talk to me about money, or you hate children.
All right. Do we have one last question, very short, 2 minutes?
Do you ever see New Hampshire stopping funding Planned Parenthood, or is Planned Parenthood too powerful?
That's in the budget.
They did stop.
What's in the budget?
He wants to
Planned
defund
Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood.
Defunding it?
We took them out.
d-
That was part of the fetal protection bill. That, and of course, the governor has supported them and claims, well, he put the money out there and no one else bid for family planning. So we put in there, if they have any connection to an abortion service, they can't get a contract. So they either have to create a different part of their business, but we have put in there specifically, if they're doing abortions, no money goes to them for family planning.
But it's the executive council
Yeah.
that deals that out too. So you've got a good executive council right now that is following what they said, and therefore they haven't been given money.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to stop them.
All right. Well, thank you very much for our panelists.
All right, remember, go to those school board meetings. That's where all your money's going.
Well,